Good day, learners. I hope this message finds you well. I hope you are all well in your respective schools. Welcome to our last part, which is part 3 for graphs. And I believe by now almost everyone knows me. If not, for those who are joining us for the first time, I am Mr. Muloi SH and I'm currently based in Tibet. Right, now let us start with our today's presentation. As usual, let us start first by recapping on what we did in our last presentation. In our last presentation, we spoke about how to plot points on the Cartesian plane. And amongst other things that we mentioned that we may need for today is that the coordinates of a point are always written in a form of x maps y. And then one of the examples that we did was that if we have point P with the coordinates 3 maps 4, that means 3 it is the x coordinate and then 4 it is the y coordinate, and then in this case they are both positive. And then we also mentioned that we will find this point in the first quadrant. Now let us remind ourselves on how to plot a certain point. Let us look at this point, point P. We are saying point P, it is 3 maps 4. Then we said in our last presentation is that we will always start from the center. We will always start from the origin. Remember that where the two axes meet, we call that point the origin, point of origin. Then we are saying the x value in this case is positive 3. So when we start from the origin, which is 0, then we are going to count 1, 2, 3. That means we will be having 3 units to the right. And then after that, we will then move 1, 2, 3, 4 units upwards. Therefore, this is where we will be locating our point P. So if you have any challenge, I believe you'll ask your educator to help you, or rather you'll go to YouTube and replay the video for the last session. But this is basically what we mentioned in our last presentation. Therefore, let us move on. So today we are going to basically try to plot the graph. Now today we are no longer talking about the points only, but we are now referring to a graph. We need to know how to draw a graph on the Cartesian plane. Right, let us consider the equation y equals to 2x minus 4. Right, let us first know what does this mean. We are saying the value of y will depend on what the value of x is. What do we mean by that? We are saying, take for an example, x equals to 3. What does that mean? It means where we see x, we will substitute with positive 3. So from this equation, where we see x, we will substitute with positive 3. Therefore, y is equal to where we see x, we are going to substitute with positive 3. Notice that when we are substituting, we show by means of the brackets that here we have substituted the value of x. And then we are going to have 2 multiplied by 3. Remember, we should always follow the BODMAS rule. 2 multiplied by 3, that will give us 6, and then 6 subtract 4 will give us 2. So we are saying if x is equals to 3, then the value of y will be equals to 2. Now, what does that mean? We are simply saying in this regard, x is called the independent variable simply because any value of x can be chosen randomly or independently. And then the y value will be called the dependent variable because the value of y will depend on what the value of x is. Now let us check on how to draw the graph. Now, sketch the graph of y is equals to 2x minus 4. For x, now, I want you to know how to read this, as you are going to come across it many times in mathematics. Now, we say x is an element of, this is how we read it. X is an element of negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. So for now, we are going to consider the x values, which are negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. Then we start with the first value. We are saying for x is equals to negative 2. That means where we see x, we are going to substitute with negative 2. Therefore, we are saying 2 multiplied by negative 2 minus 4 will give us negative 8. Also, notice again, whenever we are substituting, we show by means of the brackets that we have removed x and then we substituted with negative 2. So therefore, we are saying 2 multiplied by negative 2 subtract 4 will give us negative 8. And then we go to the second value of x. For x is equals to negative 1. Therefore, that means where we see x, we are going to substitute with negative 1. Then y is equals to 2 into minus 1, close the bracket, minus 4. Therefore, 2 multiplied by negative 1, subtract 4 will give us negative 6. For x equals to 0, where we see x, this time around we are going to substitute with 0. Therefore, we are going to say 2 into 0 subtract 4. That means 2 multiplied by 0 subtract 4 will give us negative 4. And then another one, for x is equals to positive 1. Where we see x, this time around we are going to substitute with positive 1. Therefore, we are going to say 2 into positive 1 minus 4. 2 multiplied by 1 minus 4 will give us negative 2. What does that mean? If x is equals to positive 1, therefore the value of y will be negative 2. And then looking at the last value of x, we are saying x is equals to 2 this time around. So where we are going to see x, we are going to substitute with positive 2. 2 multiplied by 2 is 4. 4 minus 4 will give us 0. Right. Notice how the values of x are changing. Every time the value of x, the input values, the values of x are changing, therefore also the values of y will also change. Then the above information, we can represent it in a form of a table, in a table form, right? So this is a table form. We are saying this is on top, we will have our x values, below we will have our y values. Then we are saying if x is equals to negative 2, therefore y will be equals to negative 8. And then it goes on to say if x is equals to negative 1, y will equals to negative 6. If x is equals to 0, y is equals to negative 4. If x equals to 1, y equals to negative 2. And the last one, if x is equals to 2, y is equals to 0. Then let us look. We take the very same table again. We need to plot this point on the Cartesian plane. I have already plotted for you, but let us look at it. We are saying x is equals to negative 2, x equals to negative 2, and then y is equals to negative 8. Y is equals to negative 8. Therefore, this will be our first point. X is equals to negative 1, x is equals to negative 1, and then y will be equals to negative 6. This will be our second point. And then notice here, x is equals to 0. This is where we stay. We don't go to the left, we don't go to the right. Then y will be equals to negative 4. and then x is equals to positive 1, y is equals to negative 2, and then the last one will be x is equals to 0, and then y will be equals to, x will be equals to 2, and then y will be equals to 0. So this is how you plot the points on the Cartesian plane. Then after you plot the points on the Cartesian plane, you simply take a ruler and then you draw a line on those points. You draw a line on those points to show that those lines are collinear, or rather they are forming a straight line. Right, what do we notice about this graph? One, we need to study this graph and to link it with the information that we have already spoken about in the past lessons. One, we notice that this graph is a linear function. Remember, we said a graph can either be a linear function or a nonlinear function. In this case, we are saying it is a linear function because all these points, they form a straight line. These lines are collinear. To say lines are collinear, we simply say they are forming a straight line. And then when we look at this again, every time when we read a graph, we mentioned it in the first lesson, every time we read a graph, we will always read the graph from the left to the right. So as you move from the left to the right, you can see that our graph is increasing. That is the first one. Or to know that this graph is increasing, we look at the values of x. As you notice here, when the values of x are increasing, the values of y are also increasing. Then the last point here regarding this graph, we can say that look at this graph. In this case, we are saying this graph does not have a minimum value or a maximum value. Notice at the ends of this graph. We mentioned in the first session that these arrows at the ends, they mean that that line will continue infinitely. So therefore, we are saying this graph does not have a minimum value. Also, it does not have a maximum value. Let us look at another graph that I have plotted for you already. Now, if we look at this one, look at this graph. Now, when we read it from the left to the right, this graph is now decreasing. However, we need to notice that the point of this graph, all these points, they are forming a straight line. All these points are forming a straight line. Therefore, we can then conclude to say this graph is a linear function. And then again, we are saying this graph in this case is a decreasing function. If you notice, as we read from the left to the right, our graph is decreasing. Or we can look at the values of x. Now we are saying as the values of x are increasing, the values of y are decreasing. In the first one, we are saying negative 2 maps positive 6. The second one, we are saying negative 1 maps 4. Notice that from negative 2 to negative 1, those are the values of x and they are increasing. But when we look at the y values, we are moving from 4 to positive 4. That means we are decreasing. So that's how you also need to analyze your graph. And then again, the last one, this graph also, we are saying it does not have the minimum value and the maximum value. Also, this is a straight line. Therefore, in this regard, because of these learners, not all straight lines don't have it, but we are talking about this one specifically. If you look at the ends of this graph, you will notice that we have the arrowheads there. So that means that line continues infinitely. I hope you find this lesson very interesting, and then I hope it assists you in understanding better the graphs and how to plot the graphs, how to analyze the graphs, and everything that has to do with the graphs. Thank you for your time. We shall meet some other time when we are dealing with a different topic. But for today, this is the last session for the graphs. Thank you very much.